When did you find out that your significant other was an actual psychopath? Long story short, I thought I was a bartender with no college experience that was dating a nuclear physicist who made 120 grand a year, and it made me feel kind of inadequate for a while. Then, on a night I'll never forget, everything changed. I took her out on a date for sushi and everything seemed fine until we went back to my place and she told me that she was inbred. Her father was a, quote, world criminal that was sued by Ted Turner and is jumping countries to avoid him. She told my roommate's girlfriend that she steals and lies uncontrollably. Then she flipped out and said my roommate was a Third Reich enthusiast who had a black aura. She asked some 10-year-old on Omegle.com if he wanted to, quote, put his little eggplant inside her, and then the deal breaker was that she picked up my shotty and thought it would be funny to point it at me and say, "You should propose to me and we'll get married on a magic carpet." Needless to say, I haven't talked to her since. I must clarify that this was the first night she came to my home and also the first time I saw her very, very, very drunk. And I've only known her for a few weeks prior to this event. One thing I know that she didn't lie about was her job. She showed me her job ID card. Oh wow. Is anyone else concerned about the quality of nuclear physicists in this country? I dated a guy for about a year and a half, living with him for the last 6 months. We broke up the night he spit in my face, called me a working girl, and threatened me. A week later, he had converted to Mormonism, and 3 months later, he was engaged to a girl he had known for a month. He lives in Utah now. Bullet dodged. Girl I'd been dating for a few months had a court date for regular child custody stuff. Not my kids, so I thought, whatever. Then she didn't come home that night. I found out through her friends that her court date was her criminal trial for theft, forgery, and fraud. Off to prison for 3 years. I opted to delete her number. I dated a girl about 3 years ago that cheated on me and got pregante by the guy she cheated on me with. She tried to smother me with a pillow in my sleep after I refused to stay with her. Looks like when faced with telling you the truth, she took the soft option. The narrator included that last comment more because he was astounded at the gall of someone for commenting it just after what was probably a somewhat traumatic incident for the original author. I mean, my god, read the room, pal. Good pun, though. As a junior in high school, I broke up with my girlfriend of a couple of years to start dating this cute girl. We'll call her Amy, because that was her name. She went to the Catholic school in town. She was also an 11th grader, 17, really hot and way fun. After a few months of awesome, her giving me jewelry as gifts, walking me home from school, sneaking out to spend the night in a motel, among other things, she started to get a little weird and clingy. She wouldn't ever let me call her, but called me constantly from other people's houses. She wanted to sneak into my house to spend the night, slept in my basement one night, under my bed another, and started to call at all hours. It was obvious that her parents had no control over her, and I was suspecting substance use. None of my friends knew her, even their friends at the Catholic school hadn't heard of her. Something was weird, but DMHS, it can blind you. I was getting near breaking it off just to stop all of the weird, when one night I got a phone call. It was Amy's dad. We had a very weird talk. Turns out she had run away from home the night we started dating, months ago, and stolen a whole bunch of stuff, including his paycheck, jewelry, oh crap, I was wearing his ring, and other stuff. She had been couch surfing and running from the cops ever since, stealing, lying, cheating. It was way weird. Oh crap. So I told him I had the ring, and he could have it back. He wanted to sit down with me and talk about how to get her caught, or at least to get her to call him. I was really scared about my parents finding out what was up. I didn't want to be associated with her anymore, and I didn't want to get caught after all the crap we'd pulled. But I was worried for her. I told him to come right over. About 30 minutes later, there was a knock at my front door. This big guy was standing there when I answered. He said, "Hi, son. I need to talk to your little brother." And I said, "I'm an only child." Blink, blink, blink. "Are you Paul?" I said, "Yeah, you must be Amy's dad." He blinked and said, How old are you?" And I said, 17, same age as Amy." He started to laugh and then stopped immediately. His face got really, really red when he realized I was serious. He came in, sat down with my folks, and then started with, "So, for starters, let me get this off my chest. Amy just turned 12 last week." Holy frick. That started a real crap storm involving the cops, her friends, all middle schoolers, oh frick me, courts, her probation officer, my school counselors, and principals. To this day, I'm still stunned. As a decent-looking, semi-popular 17-year-old dude, I dumped my longtime girlfriend for an 11-year-old runaway and then spent the next several months helping the cops track her down. In short, frick. Okay, so what follows is a long story of a crazy stalker ending with his man juice all over my sheets and undies. I don't want to go into too many details just because this is a horrible memory and my memory is blurry during the worst parts. I had a high school sweetheart. We decided to break up when we went to college. It was mutual and ended on friendly terms. He was a year older and college was in a different town, so it made sense to end it there and possibly revisit the relationship in the future when I graduated. So once that ended, my ex's best friend who was staying in town started getting really flirty. I told him I couldn't date him because it would be weird, but if he wanted to continue with a friendship, I'd be down. I thought that we were on the same boat with the friendship. A group would meet up at a diner or go camping, and that was it. After a few months or so, he started really flirting, and again I turned him down. It's not cool to hit on your best friend's ex-girlfriend, especially if they're going to try and rekindle things after the break. After I turned him down again, he fricking snapped. I'd get about 100 calls or more a day. My voicemail would be full within 20 minutes with messages of him begging for me to go out with him. The messages soon got revolting. He would tickle his pickle, repeating my name, and leave that on my voicemail. He'd go into detail of all the things he wanted to do to me. We tried talking to his parents, he was still living with them, surprise, but they were in denial, so he went to the police and I was told to log everything and I was issued a temporary protective order and I changed my number. A few days later, the calls started again. I guess he paid someone to get my new number. I never found out who did it, and Singular wouldn't let me change it again for a week. So I just left my phone off and used it for emergencies only. Jump ahead a few months and I started to get flowers and cards on my car at this restaurant where I worked. Every night there'd be something there. I got so freaked out, management had to walk me to my car every night. At this time, I don't think he knew where I lived, so I had that at least. I'm still logging everything, but he has yet to do anything that would allow me to get that restraining order. I eventually get into a car accident and my car was destroyed by a lady who ran a red light and T-boned me. I got a new car a week later, and I wake up for the morning shift to find that my tires had been slashed the night I got my car. So now he knows where I live and he's destroying my property. Still, there was no proof that he did it, so the police took note, but nothing came of it. Everything gets kind of mushed together in my memory after that, because things got worse. He found out a friend's band was playing in a club and he showed up. He shoved me to the ground and jumped on me. I was the one who got kicked out because for some reason the doorman thought I was being one of those overdramatic dumb girls. I came out of my house one day and he was sitting in the backseat of my car. It took the cops 40 minutes to get there. He started leaving scarier messages. I've got the weapon. You first, then me. I'm going to go to your work and take out all your co-workers. The cops finally took me seriously after he came over and pounded on my windows during early morning. I was issued another temporary protection order and a court date to face him and get a restraining order. The court date came and he never showed up. Turns out he was couch surfing and living out of his truck, and I guess it wasn't a big enough deal for the cops to put a lot of effort into finding him. So it all just continues and it finally accumulates into the worst day of my life. I was out with a friend and I had an uneasy feeling all night. I asked if I could stay at her house for the night and she lets me stay there and we have a few drinks of wine and get a bit drunk. I wake up at 6 a.m. to go home and get ready for my morning shift at work. I get home and something seems not right. The TV in my room was on and the front door was unlocked. I figured it was my roommates and I went into the room to turn off the TV. Well, I walk in and my bed was unmade, my underwear drawer open, and my undies everywhere. I move closer to my bed and there is splooge everywhere, white and crusty. Oof. On my pillowcases, on my underwear, on my sheets and bedspread. I'm shaking. I hear the front door slam shut. I don't know why, but my first instinct was to lock myself in the bathroom. I peek out of the window and he's there, standing on the front lawn, hysterically laughing at the house. Just laughing at the top of his lungs. I call 911. I'm crying, shaking, and barely able to talk. It took the cops a little while to get there, and by this time he's long gone. I'll never forget the look on the cop's face when they had to pack up all the stuff that he had ruined. I was given some paperwork saying that they were finally going to get him on stalking, destruction of property, and I overheard one of the cops say something about me being lucky that I didn't become a victim of the unspeakable act, which gives me freaking chills to this day. I think back on that time of my life and it's all blurry. All of these instances running into each other. I used to hate him, but now I feel sorry for him. I moved far away to get away from there and forget about everything. I never even heard if he was arrested or charged with anything. I dropped all communication with the people in my life at the time. I changed my number and never answered the phone. I still don't. This was going on between the time I was 18 and 24. I'm 29 now, and I like to think, despite everything, I came out pretty well-rounded. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not me, but an old boss of mine who had a machete hanging on his wall as some sort of ornament. One ex used it on him and didn't do too much damage. He put it back on the wall. A few months later, another guy he was dating split his face open with it. When he healed, I suggested to him that he not put the machete back this time. There are so many questions. Was your boss actually the one who was enticing these men to attack him? Or did he just have a thing for psychopaths? And of course the biggest question, did he put the blade back up on the wall? Not a crazy ex, but when I was a liberal Christian, this guy named Eli and I considered dating once, and he put me on hold to see what Jesus would have to say about it. So I waited around for a couple of months, and he didn't feel like he was getting a green light from the big man upstairs, so he asks his mother to pray for us. We were 19 and in college together, away from home, so this strikes me as a huge red flag. His mother told us that she wasn't getting a sign either and revealed to me that this was the screening process that the family went through in order to find Eli the woman that God chose for him. At first, Eli was devastated and I was quite obviously offended, especially after he told me that God had someone better in store for him and that I should be happy. We went our separate ways and I ended up getting married to one of my close friends and considered myself questioning the Christian faith, leaning towards atheism. He was horrified and we stopped talking as often. He remained single and ended up courting a nice Christian, one who was more right-wing leaning and won his mother's approval, and one who was quite similar looking to me, except eventually she rejected him. He was heartbroken. So, what does Eli do to remedy this? He enlisted in the army and asked to be put on the front lines, because obviously God doesn't want him in a relationship at all and he's going to die alone. He said if he wasn't meant to have a family, he may as well sacrifice himself for the good of our country. And yes, our army actually did put him on the front lines. To clarify, no, he didn't die, he's still out there as far as I know. Apparently, according to him, he did ask to be put out there, and I don't know if they actually listened or if it's a coincidence. He made it sound as if he could have a preference, but he did end up on the front lines like he wanted. I dated a girl whose parents had died in a car accident when she was 8. After 2 years, she told me that wasn't exactly true. She had lied because her father had mistreated her when she was very little. After another 6 months, she told me that that also wasn't exactly true. She was just trying to keep me from talking to them because they hated her because, surprise, she was a liar and crystal addict. We're no longer together. I should mention that her parents, foster parents of 10 years, gave her the boot when she was about 15, and she went to some state home for crappy orphans. Not to be confused with a crappy home for state orphans, by all accounts, it was a pretty nice place. But eventually, she dropped the crystal to devote all of her time to lying. I met her when she was 22, and we dated for 2.5 years, give or take a couple of months, until I just couldn't stand her anymore. I remember some of the lies she came up with were really impressive for their realism. She was truly gifted. I know a pathological liar. I don't date him, but now I'm thinking about how it would be for the people who would. I love torturing him to no end about his lies. Apparently, he killed someone. Also apparently, he's heavily invested in oil. Oh, he ordered a custom BMW that's been on the way for 5 years. He's setting up a worldwide organization to protect the world from evil. I have too much fun going along with his crap. I even helped him set up his, quote, organization. I put him in touch with some programmer friends I have so that they could do some work for him. I did warn them that he was crazy first. He never actually asked them to do anything. I checked up with them. I drove him to the bank because he doesn't have a car so that he could open up a bank account and put about 200 grand in it for the use of the organization. Naturally, I never saw the transfer or the opening of the account. There was plenty more stuff as well. Oh, and I'm officially part of this organization, which is divided into a cell structure, so I'm not allowed to know who else is in it. No one, I suspect. I'm a little worried that I'm going to end up being signed up for some revolutionary group and get arrested, but it's too much fun seeing where this is going. And to be clear, he is harmless, just crazy, fun crazy. I mean, let's hope that it's all harmless crazy. Kinda seems like if he's actually your friend, you should maybe look at getting him some help? But then again, who knows if he'd accept it, so what do I know? I dated a girl for a while that I actually knew for at least a year before ever transitioning from friend of friend to dating. I quickly came to realize she was a pathological liar, and she made no attempt to hide that from me. I mean, yes, she'd tell me all kinds of outrageous lies, but she'd also tell other people lies about us, in front of me. One time, we met some friends at a club, and she immediately told them that we'd spent the day in Canada. Apparently, we'd driven 5 hours in the morning, spent the day, driven 5 hours back, and we were now meeting people in this trans-dimensional day that would have been at least 40 hours long. People were looking at me like, what the frick? And I was just making, fricked if I know, face. Over the course of the few months that we dated, she told me that her father was in prison and her mother was institutionalized. Neither of these was true, by the way. That her brother was a substance user. Her brother lived with her, had a good job, and was not one of those. That her ex-husband was a smack addict. She had never been married. She worked for the governor's office. We were nowhere near the capital, and I never found out what her real job was. That she had a hoo-ha piercing accidentally torn out, which is why she had no fun bean, except she totally did. She said that she loved doing it in the butt, and would rather do it in the butt than anything else. She never actually agreed to do it in the butt with me. I could probably keep on for a while. I literally only dated her a couple of months before I had had enough. I was trying to break up with her gently when I saw a tow truck hooking up to my car outside her apartment, so I ran away mid-letdown saying, "You're too crazy!" over my shoulder as I ran. I dated a guy for over a year who turned out to be a completely charming sociopath. I was 20 and newly in love. He was 27. In retrospect, there were a lot of signs that he was dysfunctional, but being naive and in love, I brushed them off. Things were fine until one day after I'd been sick for a couple of weeks when he just turned on me, dumped me the day before my birthday in an email. I was heartbroken and in shock, and I hadn't seen it coming at all. Anyway, instead of leaving it at that, I guess the guy wanted to mess with me. So he'd keep coming to my campus every weekend, even though he was older and had never finished college, to drink with all of my friends and then come to my room and declare that he had changed his mind and still loved me. I was young and stupid and heartbroken and kept falling for it. Well, he'd borrow money and then run off the next day. If I'd call him later in the week, I'd be met with coldness until the next time he was looking for a lay. The thing is, I found it so hard to recognize this D-bag behavior because I still thought the year-long relationship had been legit. The worst thing was he was telling everyone I was a complete psycho behind my back. He'd do things like text me that he loved me and wanted to see me. Then when I'd call or text to reply, he'd show it to my friends and say I was stalking him. He spun lie after lie about me. So every time I wanted to talk to someone about how I was hurting from his awful behavior, it just confirmed all the lies he'd been telling about me. The final straw was when he asked me to invite him to my graduation. He fed me some bullcrap lines about respecting me. I didn't have any family attending since I was on another continent, so I was feeling forever alone and I said yes. Well, he decided to take a bunch of white snow and never took my picture when I got the diploma. He later that day tried to break my arm. That was obviously the final straw, and I finally saw the light of how evil and cruel he was. The unfortunate thing was that my reputation among my friends was ruined. I'd been given the crazy girlfriend label. It was so frustrating. He'd been deliberately orchestrating situations to make me seem crazy and emotional just to sabotage my reputation. I don't think I've ever felt more helpless in my life. All you want to do is yell and talk crap about this monster, but you can't, because people will just think you're crazy and resentful. It took me 2 years of holding my head high and watching my step before the social stigma he'd inflicted was lifted. I never talked smack about him, and I made sure that no matter how upset I was feeling, I acted cool and rational and collected. I was forced to be a saint because he had painted me as a crazy demon. It was one of the hardest times of my life. But to end on a semi-good note, eventually the truth came out and people saw he was a crazy, awful man, and I was the sane victim. 3 years after the darkest and loneliest era of my life, my best friend called me to apologize for not believing me. My friends had finally seen the truth and said how sorry they were that they hadn't supported me while I was being hurt so badly. I think part of what made it so hard is the fact that there was such a stereotype about crazy ex-girlfriends. He played into it perfectly and used it as a tool to keep me trapped in the cycle of abuse by way of removing my support network. Also, I know it's not much in the way of proof, but this is the only ex I've ever had drama or bad feelings towards. I'm on very friendly terms with every other ex-boyfriend of mine, and I've had no bad things to say about them or them about me, beyond the fact that we weren't fully compatible for spending the rest of our lives together. My ex would surprise me on a lot of occasions. One of the best, by which I mean worst, times was when she came over to my parents' house for dinner. It was actually only the second time they'd met her, and I told her to try and make an impression. The girl was enthusiastic, if anything, and was eager to please, so she said she'd do her best. When we got there, everything was going pretty well. She hadn't forgot their names yet, got on great with the family dog, and hadn't even burped or tooted yet. It was too good to be true. As the first course was being served, like literally as my mum was bringing over some Parma ham and mozzarella cheese — she's Italian and her cooking is amazing, by the way — my ex jumps up from the table and yelps. Horrified, I look over at her as she stumbles away from the chair and towards my mother, kicking furiously at something underneath the table. It's all in slow motion as I realize that my ex is kicking at her own handbag, which was now emptied all over the floor, and a huge freaking adult toy has just spilled out into the open. I scream in shock as she reaches down, grabs said toy and throws it with some force at my father, who just sat open-mouthed for this whole episode. You'd think that would be it, but remember how I just said he was open-mouthed? The yellow, eggplant-shaped toy hurtles towards him and actually partly enters his gaping maw. I guess that was the climax of that particular dinner. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.